So, I'll be talking about Agile, but it's not an introductory talk to Agile, as there's a lot of talks about Agile being going on already. So, actually, I've been in Agile projects for about 15 years now. I started up the first Agile projects in the Netherlands, in my company, and also in the Netherlands in the whole. And we've learned a lot from our Agile projects over the last 15 years. And there were Agile projects in all sorts, .NET projects, Java projects, distributed projects with people from all over the world in it, and in every technology. So it's a wide range of Agile projects. So this talk is a bit about, well, it's a bit of a fair warning. It's about, Agile is very, very, very good. But there's a lot of stuff that you actually can do wrong in Agile projects that will actually make Agile projects fail. Agile is not a silver bullet. Oh, there's... That's better. Should I wait for a second? So let me first introduce myself for a bit. I work at Capgemini, which you're probably all familiar with. It's a very large company. I think we employ about 125,000 people worldwide, of which there's about 25,000 in India. We have a large office here in Bangalore too. Actually, I've never visited it, and I didn't get a chance to do that this week either. So, but we're a large company, and my official function title is Principal Technology Officer, which sort of means that I deal with the innovation of software development at Capgemini and a lot of our clients everywhere in the world. So I get around a bit, and I do write a lot. I'm currently working on my second book on Agile. I published the first one in 2003, I guess. It's in Dutch, by the way, but it will be translated in English too. So here's my personal website. You know, there's a Capgemini website, of course, which is www.capgemini.com. This is my personal one, www.sanderhoogendoorn.com. This is my Twitter account, and if you have any questions that you would like to ask me by email, here's my email address as well. It's on the slides, so you can look it up later. Anyway, so here's the cover of my new book. I don't know why it looks like this. It's actually titled "This is Agile." It translates pretty good into English. But why these rocks are here, I don't know. It's my publisher who made that up, and we'll probably replace it by something else, because I don't know what rocks have to do with Agile anyway. So, let me start off by something about traditional software development. And it's a surprising story, because waterfall, as traditional software development methodologies are usually named after, is something actually that and this particular white paper is seen as the root, let's say the root of all evil. Let's call it like that. But it's the root of waterfall methodologies. Why? Well, because it has a picture in it. And that's this picture. And you're probably all familiar with this staging in software development projects. You should be. You should have had this at university or maybe even at elementary school. It's so old. So this picture was first drawn in 1970. And it actually says, here's an approach to your projects that say, well, first start off doing requirements, then do the design, then start building your software, do the coding. After the coding's done, do the testing, and after that, the application goes into application management. So that seems to be an interesting cycle. Actually, it is, because it sort of like covers all the sorts of work that are actually out there in software development projects. But if you look at this model, it's a one-pass model. It's only a start analysis after all requirements are done. And that seems logical at first. And you don't start coding until the design is done. And you don't start testing until the coding is done. This has been the most popular model for software development projects over the past 40 years. But there's a lot of gaps in this model. For instance, what people start to do, if you look at IT companies and IT departments in, for instance, banks or insurance companies or in government agencies, what they will do is say, hey, here's requirements, so we have people doing requirements. And there's analysis, so we have people doing analysis. And since they don't start after the requirements people are done, we don't need them together in the same project at the same time. That's the basic idea. It saves you money, because you don't have all these people at the same time in your project. So what these guys are doing, they write down everything they know about the system that should be produced in a document. And then the document gets handed over. And the documents get thicker and thicker along the way. So here you are, as a developer, getting I don't know what, 800 pages of document and saying, go off and build this. So especially if you are the developers and you get these documents and there's nobody to talk to who knows what's in these documents, that's hard. The last time I did a waterfall project, it was in 1998. Yeah, 1998. So I was working for a bank and I was coaching the development team. I'm a developer myself, by the way. By the way, I haven't written Java in a long time. I've been writing C# in the last 10 years. Sorry about that. But I like both languages anyway. So you start off coding. I was at this bank, and they handed me a document that had 768 pages in it. So this was my first project for a bank. So I really didn't know what it was about. And there was actually nobody to talk to. There were two designers. One of them was working already in another project, as you do in the waterfall model. So he was in another building, because this was in Amsterdam, and this bank has a whole lot of buildings in Amsterdam. By the way, they have buildings here in Bangalore too. But and the other one quit the company. So she was working already for another insurance company. So there was nobody to talk to. So how do you build a system doing that? And that's a basic gap in the waterfall model, is that you lose the knowledge that is in the people who were in the project earlier on. You lose it at every stage. And that's a waste. Why? Well, because no matter how good you are at analyzing the requirements or doing the design, you can never get everything in a document. There's always more in your head than there is in the document. And that knowledge is lost at every step in the way. And that's a shame. And there's an even worse part to it, is that what happens if the developers start developing stuff and they think of something that might be better than what's in the documents? What do? Well, in a waterfall model, you write a change request form, right? And at some point in time, at the end of the project, if there's time left, which there never is, people will start working on these change requests. Hopefully. So that's actually a waste too, because every effort that's been into the project from here to here to here is a whole lot of time and work. And if you start doing the changes at the end of the project, they're very expensive to implement because the system has already been built. It would have been much easier if you could already elaborate on changes earlier on in your project. But you cannot do that because you're not coding yet. So that's a lot of waste. So actually the waterfall model, well, to my honest opinion, it should have never been there. And if you look at this white paper by Winston Royce, I would definitely recommend you reading it. It's still out there on the internet everywhere in PDF form, and you can actually read it. It's not a long white paper. So this is figure 2 in the white paper. And there's more figures in the white paper. Actually, there's a figure 3, where it actually looks like this. Winston Royce, in this particular white paper, says that this one-pass model doesn't work in 1970. So that's kind of amazing, isn't it? He actually says, well, you should be able to go back. If you discover new stuff or new technology or whatever you might find out during coding, you should be able to go back into the design, change the design, and go forth again. And you should be able to do that, actually, from every step along the way. So this is kind of something people overread in this white paper. So from reading this white paper, there were a lot of government agencies, especially in the US, that's where it all started, but also in Europe, and I'm not sure about here in India, but especially in Europe and the US, people wrote software development methodologies that actually were based on this picture. And they didn't look at this picture. They didn't figure out that the sooner you can respond to change, the better it is. The easier it is to change your software, as you probably all know already. So here's an interesting quote in the white paper. It says that, note that it is simply the entire process done in miniature to a timescale that is relatively small with respect to the overall effort. What Winston Royce is actually saying here is that what you could much better do is take up all these different tasks and execute them in very small periods of time. Of course, if you use very small periods of time, you're only able to do a small piece of the total software that you're building. So it actually says is put all these things together in short periods of time. Now, doesn't that look a lot like Agile? Because Agile in an Agile project, you work in iterations. They're usually 2 to 4 weeks long. Well, it depends. I usually am in projects that have iterations of 2 weeks because I like them really short. But there's other people saying, well, 4-week iterations work better. And it depends on your project. And in these 2 or 4 weeks, during these iterations, what you will do is pick up a number of work items, no matter what they are, and get them through all these different tasks. It's requirements, basically, what you are working on. So you do some analysis, you do some design, you code them, you test them, and you try to get them accepted by presumably the end user or the product owner, whoever is responsible for doing that. So you do all these little steps for little pieces of work. That's basically the idea about Agile. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you work in these iterations, you get to choose at the start of each of these iterations which of the work items that are still out there you will work on. That's basically the idea. So what that means is you're able to deal with the change during the project. Because if during iteration 3, 4, 5, 7, whatever, new changes come along, new requirements are discovered, you can just put them on the whole list of things that you still need to do, which is usually called the backlog, and you can actually pick them in the next iteration. And you would probably say, if you're in a long-running project, which I am, by the way, well, there's some point in time that you've seen all the requirements, right? That you're complete. Well, you aren't. I can tell you from experience. My current project is a project that we started off in March 2010. It went into production last week. Actually, we predicted that it would go into production during this week a year ago. Why? Well, because if you work in small iterations, you're able to count the number of work items or estimate the number of work items in points, what you actually should do, and see what your average speed is during these iterations. In my particular case, we work on our scale of estimation is called smart use case points. I won't go into that today, maybe this afternoon in another talk. But and so we do, with our team, about 25 points per iteration. So that's why, and we've calculated that, we actually measured that over the past 48 iterations. So we're now in iteration 49. And that's why we could already predict when we went into production a year beforehand. And it actually worked out pretty nice. Actually, the project will still last for another year because this is an application that will be delivered in a lot of different countries, having all different requirements. So we did the first production set last week, and there will follow another 4. So that's the way you can deal with changes, reprioritizing the requirements or the work items you have. And that's a totally different way of working than this waterfall process that I described earlier on. And actually, Winston Royce should not have been the father of waterfall, which he regretted all the way, by the way, that he was mentioned that. He should actually have been the father of Agile, as he described an Agile-like process back in 1970. Now, isn't that strange? That means that we spent a whole lot of time in waterfall projects over the past 40 years, which we shouldn't have done. Now, isn't that great? I love that. So what's the next step? So the next step is Agile. So Agile, the word Agile actually came out of a sort of like workshop that a number of guys who already worked in this field, they sat together in a snow hut in Nevada or Utah or whatever, and they came up with the similarities in the different approaches that they have sort of like discovered over the years before. And they had to name it, and they named it Agile. Actually, they had a battle between the words Agile and Adaptive. Personally, I think Adaptive would have been better, because it much more encapsulates the fact that you are able to change things. Which Agile, it's more like flexible and stuff, and but it's a good word anyway. So, 15 years ago, the first Agile approaches started to become developed, like extreme programming at Chrysler, like Scrum, like the Kanban principles that came out of the car industry, and in England we had something like DSDM, and in the Netherlands we have something called SMART. So there's a lot of these Agile approaches out there. If I would sum a lot of them up, I'll probably come up to 20 different approaches that are already out there. And then people started saying, oh, this is it. So to be quite honest, it's not a revolution, it's an evolution. It has been gradually We have been learning from doing projects over the past 40, 50 years that we do this industry. So we have learned that we can do things differently. So it's not not a revolution, but it's an evolution. And to be quite honest, that's why I've put up this slide, Agile is good. I love it. I won't never do anything else but Agile, depending, we might find something that's even better than that, something like continuous delivery, which might become popular in the next 10 years, but over the past 15 years, Agile has been my approach of choice. But actually, there is no such thing as the Agile approach. There's a whole bunch of them, but there's no Agile approach. So that's an interesting fact. And Agile is good, but Agile projects will start failing over the next few years. They already do, of course, although the rate of failure is much lower than it is in waterfall projects, much, much lower actually, but the rate in Agile failing projects will rise. And I'll try to explain to you why that is, because that's an interesting fact if you're already familiar with Agile. So Agile is no silver bullet either. There's no guarantee that if you do an Agile project that it will succeed. It might succeed, and the chances of that are bigger than if you do a waterfall project, but there's no guarantee. So I'll show you why. So I tweeted something a while ago. I said, just witnessed a 10 million euro classical software development project fail miserably. So what's your feedback? So people started sending me tweets, and people said, well, they should never have used waterfall, which is probably a good assumption. And another guy said, does the name of the project coincidentally start with a C? I don't know why, but presumably failing projects start with a C. So if you're in a project which name starts with a C, abandon it. That was my conclusion anyway. So the main conclusion from this is, well, if you do waterfall projects, it's actually because of the methodology that they fail. Well, it's sort of right. But there's an interesting thing. You know, the next thing I did, after a while, after I sent the first tweet, I sent another tweet out saying, I heard about a Scrum project that spent several million euros and didn't deliver anything. So what do you think the response to that was? And I can tell you, it's a different response, because what people said actually, they said, well, they didn't apply Scrum right. That's different, isn't it? And there were other people saying this project likely did Scrum but, which is also a popular phrase in the Scrum community, not Scrum. So basically people said, this project failed, but it wasn't due to the methodology. So if a waterfall project fails, it's due to the methodology, and if an Agile project fails, or a Scrum project, or a Kanban project, it's not the methodology. No, of course not, because the methodology is it's sort of like holy. And that's not the case, you know. It is never that a methodology will make your project succeed, no matter what methodology you use. It's the people in the project that actually make the project successful. So, I'm going to bash a bit on Agile and on Scrum in particular, because Scrum is by far the most popular methodology out there, or approach. So I'm all for Agile and for Scrum, and I'm not for waterfall style projects. So just to make that clear. But Scrum project in particular will fail in an increasing rate over the next few years. That's my personal prediction. Why is that? Well, it's because of this. This is Japanese, by the way. I don't know if you read Japanese. I don't, by the way, but I'll show you what Wikipedia has to tell about this. It's a model that is being used in Japanese sports. So like judo, karate, stuff like that, jiu-jitsu. And they have a learning model. They say, well, first you start learning stuff. It's the basic level. You learn from somebody who's already done it before. A master, so to say. Not a Scrum master, but a real master. So if you've seen the movie The Karate Kid, the original one, there's a Mr. Miyagi in there who's the master. And then there's this guy, this boy who wants to learn karate. And the first thing he gets to do is wash his car. Remember that? So it's wax on, wax off, wax on, or it's the other way around. I always forget. So wax on, wax off. And he has to do this all day. And he doesn't know why. So he's at this top level, the shoe level. He has to learn the basics. And later on in the movie, you will discover why he has to do this. It's because it's defense mechanism against other ugly boys who are wearing black suits and are the bad guys, obviously. So that's the level that he is in. So if you learn the basics and you get to, they should be automatic to you. And that's what you learn in Agile too. So the next level is you start breaking with tradition. You find out that in the real world, these movements are sometimes not enough. So you learn new movements and you try to incorporate them with the movements that you have already automatically in your system. So you get to the next level. And then the third level is transcendence. Of course, it's Japanese, so you have to have transcendence in it or whatever. And so there's no, it all goes natural. It is, you're so good at it that every situation that you meet, you're able to adapt to. And you're able to incorporate it and find the solution for the problems that are out there. So this is the level that Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, Lean champions, Kanban, whatever guys, Pokemon trainers, whatever you might have, should be at. But the problem is, Agile is becoming so popular, so intensely popular, that there's a lot of guys now being trained as Scrum Master in particular. Is any of you a Scrum Master? Oh, there's always a few of them. I never bothered to take the exam, by the way. So my company wants me to, so I'll take the exam when I go back to the Netherlands. And anyway, so there's a lot of people being taught to be a Scrum Master. So how much days of training did you guys get becoming a Scrum Master? 2 days, are you? Right. So there's a lot of guys out there in the field, guys and girls, by the way, in the field, who are actually absolute beginners in it, but still have the title Scrum Master. And since they have the title Scrum Master, people believe that they're at the third level. They have a lot of experience, a lot of know-how, and that doesn't go for all of them, because you have to start somewhere. It's nobody's fault. It's not Scrum's fault. It's not the people's fault. It's not the company's fault. But actually, we as Capgemini, I think we have about 1,000 Scrum Masters currently, worldwide. So that's quite a lot. But do you think that they all have done projects? I would seriously doubt that. And it's not only at Capgemini, it's at all companies, of course. So there's a lot of people out there who've been sent into the field, coaching projects, sometimes big projects, who don't have any experience other than a 2-day training course. And I'll show you an email quote that I got a while ago. Jack stated that there was a large bank looking for Scrum Masters. And Jack stated that we have over 300 resources. I think he meant people, by the way. That's a large company talk, isn't it? Who are trained as Scrum Master. By the way, Scrum is not an acronym. This is a wrong spelling. So the guy who sent it should have never got this certificate. As it happens, I'm meeting him this afternoon. 300? I don't know, but at that point in time, I didn't even believe we had 300. So of these 300, they could only have had experience if there have been 300 Agile projects in the company, which I would doubt. It's probably a lot, but 300 would be too much. So there's a lot of guys being sent out there in the field with too little experience. And people in the field, in the projects, all think of them as like, hey, you're Superman. You know everything. You're the Zen master. Help us do this project. And there you go with your 2 days experience. That's not a good thing, That's not good for projects. What will happen in those projects is that they will become very dogmatic in how they tackle Agile or Scrum or Kanban or Lean or whatever they do. XP. So I'll read you out loud again from Wikipedia. They say dogma is the established belief or doctrine held by a religion, Scrum, or a particular group or organization, the Scrum Alliance or whatever they call it these days. What you have, Scrum Org, Scrum Alliance. It's authoritative and not to be disputed, doubted, or especially diverged from. So here you go. All these guys go out in the field, have the 2-day training course, and set out to do the projects just like they were taught, which is good, by the way, but they still have to learn a lot. So what will happen is this. First of all, they will start bashing on everything that comes from another religion. So if you have a 2-day trained Scrum Master in a Scrum project, they will actually propose a lot of things to the project and ban out a lot of other things from the project that might have been good for the project. I'll give you an example. I was on a phone call 3 weeks ago with a project in Belgium. They were in trouble. It was a Scrum project, a large Scrum project, and it was actually done for an atomic energy agency in Belgium. So there you go. And actually what they said, I had the project manager and the Scrum coach in a meeting, in a conference call. They said, well, the project manager said, the problem is we didn't write a plan. when we started the project. And then the Scrum Master defended, and he said, you don't do that in Scrum. Would you believe that? That's plain silly. So there were no acceptance criteria for the software being built. So the customer was able to say, oh, this is not what I like. Build it differently. And it went on and on and on. It was a project that should have lasted for 4 months, and they were 2 years down the road, and they didn't finish anything. By the way, it was not even the project I mentioned in the tweet, because that was another failing Scrum project. They spent 4.5 million euros and didn't deliver anything. So, but that's not the fault of Scrum, by the way. It's the fault of the fact that there's too much inexperienced people in the field. And they will tell you things like this. Have you ever been, I don't know, how many of you are in an Agile project? Or show of hands. Ah, that's good, quite a lot. So you've all been in stand-up meetings, have you? So there's a sort of like dogma about this, is that in a stand-up meeting, people should take turn automatically, right? That's the basic idea. So I once got with a Scrum Master in a project, and he was actually saying, oh, it should go automatically. And you know what happens? In starting projects, starting teams who have never done this before, they will actually turn to the guy in the lead, sometimes the architect, sometimes the Scrum Master, sometimes the project master, and turn to him and wait for their turn. And in Scrum, that's what the dogmatic people say, in Scrum it should be like this. And I'm fine with that, but I'm also fine with this situation, knowing that starting teams will work like this for a while. And then a guy came up to me and he said, well, if it doesn't work like this, you should pass a baton. Isn't that like kindergarten agile or whatever it is? That's plain silly. You know, it works for a while. Let people learn and experience what works best for them. That's the basic idea. So again, this is a stand-up meeting, of course. Well, you've all seen them. But I'll show you another picture of a stand-up meeting miserably failing. This is what might happen. And this is something you have to do something about. This was as a large insurance company, and this was the project leader, and he wasn't very into Agile and Scrum, and he liked it, but he had no experience. So he started sweating every morning when he came in. Actually true. And this is what happened. These were all serious guys, serious developers. Very good developers, by the way, especially him. He's a great guy, by the way. But so they all sat down at the desk, read their email during the stand-up, and nothing came out of it. So stand-up meetings can also fail, but it's a very, very good instrument. So you should actually make this work. What I actually did here is said, well, stop having them in the room where your computers are, go out, go to the coffee machine and have the stand-up meeting there. And that worked better. So you can do simple things, but they have to come from experience. He was unable to cope with that. So he was at the shoe level. So another thing is in a Scrum project, but I'm just picking on Scrum because it's the most popular approach anyway. So usually you have something like this, which is called a Scrum board or a task board or whatever you want to call it. It has user stories in here, and it has tasks that come out of the user stories, and they go through this cycle, to do, in progress, done. That's basically it. What I like to do in my projects is tackle it a little bit differently. I see different stages in my project. So for instance, this is the dashboard for my current project, although this is an old picture. It has a stage in iteration, working, developer testing, acceptance testing, rework, acceptance and approval. So that's the basic steps we take in our process. So Scrum is not a process. So actually what you could do in a Scrum project is create your own process, just as long as you follow the principles, which is good. So we do that. So we have a slightly different dashboard. And in came a Scrum Master who was doing an audit on a project, and he said, this is wrong. And I said, no, it isn't. And he said, yes, it is. So we had this debate about it, and I said, well, I don't really care if you think this is wrong or right. It's the way we do it, and it works for us. So leave us be. And this is a very successful project, I can tell you. So, or this thing. I did a talk yesterday and the day before about a technique called smart use cases, and I will do another talk late in the afternoon today. Hopefully you're not all too tired to visit that. But basically, in Scrum and XP project, XP stands for Extreme Programming, there's a unit of work which is called the user story, which is basically this. This is the format of a user story. In complex situations, like I will show you in a minute, I'll skip some stuff here. Oh, I don't want to skip this one. But I'm running out of time, as I see. So, in complex situations, in complex projects, this might not be your unit of work of choice. You might need something that has a little bit more structure. And then people come up to me and say, well, you cannot do models in Agile. Agile says you cannot do modeling. No, it doesn't. It doesn't say anything about modeling. So it especially doesn't say that you're not allowed to. So that's a bad thing. So I'll skip this one anyway, but I won't skip this one. Developers in Agile Project. We all are probably. If you meet with developers are great guys. And what they will do, they will become very creative in their work, which is good. Because I love creative work, it's the stuff I do. And what they will do, if there's a simple solution, they'll probably come up with something which is better or nicer or even easier to the customer. Like in the very first .NET project that I coached in the Netherlands, it was actually the first project .NET in the Netherlands, there was a guy, a developer in a meeting with a customer, and the customer said, I need a grid with the regions and the total amount of stuff in that region. And then he came up in the meeting and he said, well, you know what we could do? We could actually draw a pie chart of these regions with the percentages in it, and you could actually click on it and it drilled down and stuff like that. So this was .NET 1.0. So that's really early on. That was in 2001. So you couldn't do pie charts in .NET at that point in time. So we had to figure out how to create a pie chart, create the JPEG, find the regions on it using sinuses, cosinuses, and tanguses, and whatever you have. Create triangles on it, because hotspots in HTML are either triangles or squares. Create all these little triangles on it, and be able to click on it. So it cost them actually 3 days and 3 nights. The original grid the customer requested for would have taken about 30 minutes. And you know what happened during the meeting? The customer said, oh yeah, that's cool. I want to have that. So in Agile, you should always be aware that good is good enough. Otherwise, you will never finish the project. So a few more topics. So to be quite honest, actually I'm only halfway through my slides. I didn't expect me to take so long about the first part. So to be quite honest, there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all Agile approach. There is no approach out there in the world, Agile approach, that actually will make your project succeed. There's differences in that. And I'll skip through the slides a bit because I only have about 10 minutes. On my watch I have 10 minutes left. So I have to search a bit for the parts that are really, really important. I'll skip the team part a bit. So, okay, we'll go over to the backlog. Right, so in a Scrum project, I have one question for you. Who of you is in a Scrum project? Or an XP project for that matter? Where does the backlog come from? Sorry? Yeah, but I mean, when is the backlog there? And what's in it? How do you do it? So originally, in Scrum, and in XP as well, at some point in time, you will have a backlog. That is when iteration 1 starts. Now currently they have iteration of sprint, as they call it in Scrum, sprint 0. It's actually good because they move from 1-based counting to 0-based counting, which is much better for C# and Java. I think 1-based counting is for VB developers, and you shouldn't develop in VB anyway. But how to get to the backlog is a big question. There is no technique out there in Scrum or XP, which both use user stories, that actually tells you that what's in the backlog. So if you look at a basic XP picture, there's user stories. And the only thing they say about user stories is sort of the format that they have, and that in this particular case, it's the customer who writes them. But when he writes them and how he gets to the user stories, based on being able to change your way of working every iteration, alter it, improve on it. And if you do the handbook of Agile, that will get totally banned. And it's this creativity and the fact that you will improve on your way of working every iteration that is so powerful in Agile. So you can do anything. You can build this from it, or you can, I want to have one of these. This is good, isn't it? You could have a software factory based on Agile. Whatever you do, but please don't pull out all this creativity from it. Like this one, this company did already. They created a spreadsheet with every role in it and every task and every deliverable, even in an Agile project. This should never happen. This is so wrong. Oh, I hate that. I don't hate the company, but I hate the way that they did that. So in perspective, Agile is not a religion. There is no true Agile belief, not even Scrum or Kanban. So don't be a zealot. Keep the flexibility. Keep your mind open, which is really important. And it's a sliding scale. In more complex projects, you need to add a little bit of structure to it. And don't say, oh, this is Scrum as it is, and go along with it. And especially the more complex projects will fail on you. So don't do that. Assemble Agile from what you know. From all the Agile approaches, there's useful stuff in there. People usually already combine the technical practice from XP, like continuous integration, like pair programming, like test-driven development, with the process of the approach of Scrum. And there's lots of stuff to learn from the other Agile approaches. Look at Kanban, for instance. It has very useful aspects in there. And this is basic stuff of Agile. This is what you should all do, and then you should build up on it. Use short iterations, teams that collaborate with all the different roles. Use a small unit of work. Plan continuously, every iteration again and again. Improve on your planning. Deliver early and often, and simplify your communication. Although in an offshore environment, that's a little bit harder than if you want to have a co-located team, but still you need to build from this in whatever direction you go. And use everything that you can find, even in your traditional software development. Don't throw everything away that you had, because there's probably a lot of good stuff in there already. So that's it. And you know what? There's a lot of mumbo jumbo going on in these agile communities. A lot of softness in there, lots of fluffiness in there, and I hate that. A quote I have on the slide that I skipped said, write small things on small papers. It's your Kaizen. No, it isn't. I write code. That's what I do. So, I'll leave you with it. Thank you for being here and having me do this talk. Here's my Twitter account if you want to ask me some questions, and my email address is on the slides too. Have a good day at the conference, and well, maybe till next time.